Kick-Ass 2 is a movie that succeeds in being a sequel for the most part. It actually continues the story of the first one and isn't just a rehash of what came before. This movie, much like the first one, is a parody of comic books, but rather than being a parody of the same thing as the first one, it parodies superhero groups rather than just superhero tropes. The plot follows Dave again as he decides that even though being Kick-Ass is extremely dangerous, he continues to do it as he feels this is all he has going for him in life. And he decides to team up with Hit Girl and train with her in an attempt to not get his teeth kicked in every time he tries to stop a thug. However, some complications come up and Hit Girl is no longer able to be Hit Girl anymore, so Kick-Ass, realizing that he can't do this on his own, joins the superhero group Justice Forever, led by Colonel Stars and Stripes, who is obviously a parody of Captain America. I like this movie for the most part, and even though I said it succeeds in being a sequel, the movie does have several things that I don't like in it, one of which being Dave. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Dave for the most part, but he has these sudden outbursts at his dad that come out of nowhere, and the movie has him say some pretty unforgivable things to his father. I don't get why this happens. As far as I knew, him and his dad had a fine relationship, and it doesn't make much sense why he would tell his dad that when he dies, no one will miss him. Dave also says some pretty inconsiderate things to Hit Girl. Towards the beginning of the film, we see Hit Girl grieving over her father, and Dave, instead of comforting her, just tells her that her dad was crazy. Like, geez, guy, be a little considerate. All of these things really come out of nowhere and go away almost as fast as they're introduced. And if it weren't for Aaron Taylor Johnson being such a likable actor, I would have despised this character in general. The movie does, however, manage to keep the same lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek feel from the first film. And much like the first film, this movie manages to deviate from the really dark content from the comic. The comic has several of the same problems that the first comic does. It starts off really lighthearted and then gets really dark, although this time it gets dark much faster. Like in the scene where Colonel Stars and Stripes gets killed, Red Mist has one of his henchmen decapitate him and his dog and puts the dog head on his body. The movie, much like the first one, manages to keep from getting this dark, but it does something I actually like. While the first one, if a scene from the comic was too dark, the movie would just avoid doing the scene in general. But this movie will have the same scene play out, but instead of having it play out the same way it does in the comics, it'll find a way to make fun of the scene. Once again, taking the scene where Colonel Stars and Stripes is killed, the scene almost plays out exactly the same way it does in the comics, except for when one of the henchmen asks, "Should I kill the dog?" Red Mist responds with, "No way, that's too dark." I really appreciated that. All in all, this movie manages to be fun like the first one, but there's several things in it that keep it from being as good as the first one. I still recommend you watch it, especially if you're a fan of the first, or if you're just looking to be entertained for an hour and a half.